Hey, thanks for listening to VT Water Cycles podcast. This interview with Rob from Winooski was a lot of fun, and I hope we get to do it again. Looking forward to getting feedback from everybody who hears this. So here it is.
Oh, sick setup, dude.
This is my setup. Dude. I'm kind of just roughing it out. I haven't completely figured everything out yet.
This is sick. I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I haven't been on a microphone before, so you're going to have to...
That's okay.
All right.
It's not a prerequisite.
Cool.
Do you prefer water? I have some beers, if you'd like a beer.
I'll take a beer, sure.
Yeah, I'm going to have a beer as well.
Oh, this is going to be fun, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, this is my first podcast interview. Never done this before.
Hey, we'll fumble through it. It'll be I could be a guinea pig for you. That'll be cool.
Right on. Yeah, I have a lot of I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I have a feeling for like how it should go, I guess. But
I listen to a couple. I listen to a lot of history podcasts. There's a podcast I listen to called Baz Battles.
Baz Battles?
Yeah. It's a history podcast about ancient battles and like what happened. Like I'm listening to a series right now about the Macedonians and Alexander the Great, and like it's like 45 minutes, and they just kind of talk about, all right, so here's what happened, and it kind of just relaxing. It's really fun, and podcasts are awesome, man. Like have you
ever listened to Dan Carlin?
I've heard of the name.
Hardcore History.
I've heard the name. Yeah, I've heard of that show.
Great. Yeah, he does. I listened to not too long ago a big thing about Alexander the Great. And his, I think that his most recent one was like, it was about Julius Caesar and the Gaul, the Gauls, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, Dan Carlin's definitely one of my favorites.
I'll have to check him out. I think my brother listens to that podcast. And I think that's who I heard it from. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to sit down and check it out. It sounds like that'd be up my alley.
So, if there's anything that you say that you don't want in there, I can... my protocol, essentially, that I decided beforehand is that I'm going to do all the editing...
Sure.
And get a final cut, and then I'll send you a copy so that you can review it before it actually goes public.
So if I spout off like...
Yeah, you talk about an ex-girlfriend.
Edit out that racist tangent I went on, and okay, I gotcha. No, I think, okay, cool. I hear you, man, totally. Don't, it's funny, I used to smoke a ton of weed before I moved to Vermont. When I lived back home in Pittsburgh, and I was in school for respiratory. I was I smoked a fair amount then, and it was good. We would always get excited when we would get stuff from Vermont, and then I moved to Vermont, and I just kind of never got back into it.
Yeah.
What was great was that when it came a point in my life where weed just wasn't something that made sense or that I wanted to do anymore was the day I stopped smoking weed, and it wasn't anything that was difficult to do or it wasn't something that shook up my life that I was like, oh man, this was really challenging or like this big, like it was just like one day it was just like, oh okay, well I'm in a new place in life right now and I don't smoke anymore, and I haven't smoked since.
Yeah.
And it's nothing I really miss.
And I think that's the beauty of weed.
Absolutely.
It's just got this kind of like, it just falls away into the background.
Absolutely. Like it is, they say it's non-habit forming, and now, like, trying to quit cigarettes, Jesus. Yeah. Like, totally different ballgame. Yeah. Like, I would love to quit smoking, and it's really hard to do. I wanted to quit weed, and it wasn't even an afterthought. Like, it was just a new place in life, and there it went, and I don't even miss it. So I don't know. Weed is fascinating to me.
So like, yeah, I don't know. I've just had such a friendly, kind relationship with
weed. It's a beautiful thing to have. I think And for a lot of folks, it is, I just think, a wonderful thing, like a wonderful aspect to like just cut loose and put you in just a mellow spot. And that it is illegal is, I think, such a shame, like, especially as we explore more and more into the medical benefits of weed and what it can do for people with PTSD. What it can do for people who have Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, you just watch the video of the guy with the Tourette's, and he takes a rip, and it's just like,
and it's just boom, that there's so much potential there, and but prohibition is going to end soon, and when it does, we'll all be better off for it, and I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
I follow that topic a lot, obviously, because it's a big part of my
of course
MO.
Absolutely.
But
one of the things I worry about is when weed becomes legal. Who is going to move in to corner that market?
Oh, that's a
what I mean?
A huge topic.
Right now, it seems to be in the hands of people in medical dispensaries.
Yeah,
and those seem to be, at least for the most part, folks that have been growing for a long time, know what they're doing, love their craft, and are working really hard to set standards for this budding industry. Budding. Right now, I think that's great, and I like that direction that it's going in.
Yeah.
I have a real fear, though, of the Philip Morrises or the R.J. Reynolds companies or whatever, taking what they've done, taking the work that they've done and the research and the standards that group has created, and just like taking it away from them and capitalizing on it.
Yeah,
I don't know for sure if that's what's going to happen.
No,
I do have a little bit of I think that's something that we all need to try to safeguard as we go forward.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. When I used to live in Northern California for a little bit. The town I lived in, Arcata, California, it was essentially 40% of the income for the city was from people who were growing weed.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Like, it was just a weed growing mecca. Like every fourth house on a street was a grow house. And
Hell yeah.
It was really interesting because there was a referendum. This was like 2009, 2010. There was a referendum to legalize weed back then. And it was so interesting to be a part of that political sphere because there was this whole local economy. People were very protective of it.
Oh, I bet.
And because of that, they didn't want to, because they knew what was going to happen. They knew that Philip Morris and Big Tobacco was going to come in and corner the market. And just like, the thing is when a big company like that wills it and the government isn't specifically prohibiting them from doing it, they have the money to do whatever what they want.
Exactly.
That's another thing that we can swear on this. Sometimes I just omit swears.
Sure, hey.
But I have the explicit rating.
I hear you. I'll try to keep my language PG. But no promises.
If it slips that, or if it's contextual, it's totally fine. Like I wouldn't swear to just swear.
No, of course.
And I think it's even like, to an extent, it's okay for kids to hear adults swearing.
Yes.
If it's contextual and there's some benefit to the conversation.
Of course.
Otherwise.
It's we live in an age of free trading information, and the internet is not rated PG. It's if you are okay, so an example of that. So I play a lot of Dota 2. All right.
Nice.
And I play but what I do even more than play Dota 2 is watch people play Dota 2. Love Twitch, love watching tournaments. There is a little sphere of folks who put together the casting for Dota 2. And one of the big things that the company Valve, who owns the game Dota 2, tried to do, I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago, was that at any of the Valve-sponsored events, they really tried to get the casters to kind of clean up their language. And they're like, look, this is a game played by little kids. We're here at this big tier, $25 million tournament event. Like, a lot of people are watching. We want to be a PG-friendly kind of audience. Clean up your language. And that happened like I want to say maybe 3 years ago, and it did not work. So
wow, what happened?
Because it's just kind of because the casters just kind of have this like casual relationship with each other. They just talk to each other like you and I are talking right now, and like they just don't really even think about it. They don't even think to not swear, and
it's just part of their vernacular.
It's just part of their vernacular, right? And they just, they were just talking, and these are guys from all different countries, it was a real problem at first, and then they really, you could tell they were trying, but things would slip out, especially when action would get heated.
Yeah,
and it just ended up like not working out all that great. What happened, instead of Valve getting tight-fisted about it, they relaxed, and they said, hey, you know what? Swearing is going to be a part of this game. When you play the game, people are going to swear at you. When you watch the game, casters are going to swear. It's just wow. This is the reality of the internet, is that people are not censored, and you really can't expect them to, because it's just not naturally going to happen, even if you want it to. And it was an interesting thing that they relented on that, because I thought it was like a really like, oh, okay, so they're letting casters swear now, and they didn't before. I wonder why that is. And I think the reason is you just really can't safeguard against it. Like, it's a fight that is just not worth.
Too tough to nerf.
Too tough to nerf, exactly, right.
I'm a big fan of StarCraft too.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
I'm like the exact same in the StarCraft 2 world. Like,
hell yeah.
I just watched this cast recently, and it was for the StarCraft Remastered launch. And it was just,
with Day 9 and all those guys?
Day 9, Tasteless.
I saw some of that. I
ended up watching some of that. It was so cool to see those guys just chilling in the living room.
Yeah.
That was kind of a little bit of an inspiration for like my approach here. Like, I kind of want just like to bring somebody in to like I definitely like threw a bunch of shit against the walls to like just
this is sound dampening.
That's on purpose.
Like that. Yeah, that's hell yeah.
I'm trying to create different shapes and spaces so that the sounds don't just like hit a wall.
Yeah, this setup is really nice.
Eventually, I want to have like a monitor here. Like I have a touchscreen monitor that's like yay big.
Yeah.
And I want to mirror what's on that monitor right there.
Oh, that'd be sick. Yeah.
So essentially, both the host and guest can look at the screen and not turn away from the microphone.
Cool.
That's like, because I see that happen on Joe Rogan a little bit.
Yeah.
And they're always trying to control the mic. And like that's kind of why I went with these like boom mics.
Yeah, these are
get
nice.
Like kind of a focused thing, but at the same time be a little distance, so it's not. You don't have to like hold yourself in this mechanical position.
Is this thing on?
Like, and I didn't want to fuck around with like putting headphones on people or like earbuds. So I feel like my setup has come a long ways.
Yeah, it is. It's cool. Sitting down here, having water, like I was like, oh man, I'm important. This is
no, I do want
cool.
people to feel important.
Yeah.
And just like all amenities accounted for. Just like leave nothing but conversation.
Totally. And it is a really cool place you have here, man.
Yeah, thanks.
I like it a lot. No, I like the exposed brick and the that's sick.
Yeah, I think the original section of this building was like 250 years old or something like that. And my landlord does a really good job of taking care of the place.
Cool.
And
I was going to say, looking at your bricks, they look like the bricks in my apartment. My apartment is the block building. Right down the street, right next to McKee's.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, those bricks look strikingly similar to the ones that I have from my wall.
Same company who put them up
same
like so
guys,
many years ago.
Probably the same ex-Union soldiers home from the war, putting together masonry. So that doesn't surprise me to hear that this place is that old. Looking at your bricks, and it's
the section I live in, I think, is like slightly newer than that, but the original, like, you can see the old beams in my landlord's apartment, and it's like, wow.
There's some
horsehair plaster and shit.
Oh yeah, totally. Above my apartment, I have a fake ceiling that's about this height, but above it, the actual ceiling goes up another like 4 or 5 feet.
Oh, wow.
And when you go up there, yeah, you can see those big fossilized beams that they have up
Petrified.
there. Petrified beams that are just like, it's cool. It's just really old architecture, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. So, what got me started on the route to start my own podcast was being involved in another podcast.
Okay.
And I caught the bug, essentially.
Hell yeah.
VPR does a Brave Little State, and like once a month they pull out, like they have people go on their website and ask a question, and once a month they pick one, and they're like, let's go with it. Let's do some investigative reporting on this person's question. It's
sure.
Fucking fantastic.
Yeah, totally.
I heard their first podcast. It was like, it was about the dialects and vernacular, or the specifically the dialects in Vermont.
Okay.
And that was the focus. And it was just such a great episode.
Totally.
Very NPR, like just, professionalism.
Yes.
Like high quality mics. And like,
right.
I asked a question after hearing that episode. What is Vermont going to do about the aging water sewage systems?
Okay.
And my shit got voted up.
Oh, cool.
So I got to be on their show.
Nice, dude.
And I was like, wow, this is a hella opportunity. Like, this is so
excellent.
This is exactly what I want right now. Cool. And so I met with them at, like, there's a, right in Colchester, or I think it's Essex Junction, I don't know. Up the road, there's VPR Broadcasting Studios, and I went in there, and I met Angela Evansy. She was the host. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she was really cool, and she brought like another investigator who's like totally on the beat with the sewage situation in Vermont. And so we did an interview with the former mayor in Rutland, who's in charge of waterworks.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then we went to Montpelier, and I got to interview this general. He's like head of the House Committee on Natural Resources.
Okay.
So a House member, but like kind of high up in the Vermont Congress.
Yeah.
It was just really interesting to get his perspective.
Oh, I bet.
And I'm talking to this guy, and there's like this other old, like super old House member who's just got like the total chin beard, like just super old classic farmer guy.
Hell yeah.
And he's just like listening. He's like, just nodding his head. He's like, oh, yeah.
Nice.
And it was great. It was great to get that kind of like perspective of like, I'm just in this room where they're making the laws about the water and stuff. And
that's cool.
I also did an interview with a couple of people from Burlington, the waterworks department by the skate park.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And kind of got their perspective. They were really pushing the different things people can do with their acre or 2 acres that can really reduce the amount of phosphorus that runs off into waterways. Because phosphorus, I guess, is essentially just
it's a
growth. It's an element, but I mean it's
right. It's not good to have in your water because it's
so I learned so much about what is actually the problem, because apparently sewage is only like 4% or 10% of the phosphorus issue in the lake, and most of it is like agriculture. Like,
well, of course,
which makes sense because it's like just we don't call cow shit sewage.
Correct.
So that's just a definition of terms.
We don't send it through, we
don't give them porcelain either.
Right, exactly. Right.
So that was like an eye opener to realize that there's this whole phosphorus cycle that follows the water cycle, and then I found out there was another cycle. It's like a carbon. Was it the carbon cycle? There's another element that is affecting the western half of Vermont.
Okay, interesting.
Eastern half of Vermont, like along the Connecticut River.
Okay.
And their issue is different than ours. I should fucking look it up. I don't even know how.
Phosphorus tends to run west, whereas whereas carbon tends to run east. No,
it's like
no,
north,
totally.
south, east, west.
I think that a big part of that too is UVM.
Yeah.
UVM has always been, and still in a lot of ways still is, primarily an agricultural university. And it's...
the Morgan horse.
Totally, and it's it has a long history of the lake we have here is probably Lake Champlain is probably the most heavily researched lake. Like more grad students than any other place on the earth have probably done more research on just what goes on in that lake. And the extent of the phosphorus problem is, I think, really well understood because of all of the research that has gone into just how thoroughly we understand.
I never really thought about it like that because there are so many lakes that just there's like 5 people who give a damn.
You think about you think about, so we have it's not the best. I don't know. I think about our agricultural state here in Vermont, and I think we're pretty good as far as sustainability and goes for at a state level. We have pretty, I think, reasonable, responsible farming practices here in Vermont as opposed to states like Nebraska. And, when you compare how our cows live and how they're raised to how factory farms in Texas operate, it's like, wow, we have this very agriculturally, centralized or
centralized.
This very agriculturally minded, focused kind of economy state here in Vermont.
Yeah.
And it generates this phosphorus problem in the lake.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we get around that? And then you think about like these factory farms, like in Texas, where you have just what's the phosphorus like there? Does anyone care? Like, what's the extent of the problem there? Like,
that's really interesting.
What's going on? And I don't know.
When I think of Texas, I think of like them selling sewage water to.
Oh yeah.
What's that state called? Oklahoma.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And they're just like buying the sewage water to pump in for fracking.
Right.
And it's just like, oh my fucking Lord.
Yeah, I know. It's like. So when, like, on the one hand, it's not to diminish or marginalize or trivialize the phosphorus problem we have here in Vermont.
Yeah.
With our lake, but it does make me wonder, like.
You think it pales in comparison?
Yeah, like if it's this here, man, what is it like in states that just really don't give a shit?
Yeah.
I don't know. I bet you those guys would have a better answer to that question. But I don't know.
It's interesting. I can't really imagine living in a state that has an ethos of we don't give a shit.
I've
lived in Vermont, Colorado, and California.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those are pretty like resource focused kind of states. Like Colorado is just like so measuring every drop of water that comes off your land.
I don't doubt it.
And in California, like I just remember getting stopped at the border because I had a couple of apples in my fucking passenger seat, and they're like, "No way."
Yeah.
I was like, "Wow, I didn't realize you guys cared that much about apples. Like, what about the ones I just ate and I'm gonna potentially shit out?" Like,
and they're like, "Sir, you'll have to come with us.
We need to clear you out, sir." Yeah.
This man is a mule. He's just an apple.
He's got seeds.
Oh my, that's too funny. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I've lived here in Vermont now for coming up on 8 years. In November, it will be 8 years.
Nice.
And I love it here, man.
That's great, man.
It is living here has changed my politics. Living here has given me just a complete 180 perspective on things like the government's role in my life. Things like. How close I pay attention to local politics and state level politics.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vermont government is unlike a lot of states that surround it.
Yes, absolutely. I think part of it is that it is a small enough state that the issues that the state has control over are going to probably end up being a little bit more impactful. Whereas you have a gigantic state like Pennsylvania. You know, the working class person is a much you tend to legislate how to deal with masses of people as opposed to how you deal with individuals or small groups of people who can have like actual ideas or focused discussions. In Vermont, it's a little different. It's small enough that, hey, if you pose a question, you can sit down with some senators and you can discuss it, and you can inform
I posed
your
a question to my state radio,
absolutely
state public radio, and I ended up in a room speaking with a House rep, and I could easily, like, if you ever go into the Capitol building in Montpelier, it's so different than what you would expect.
I've been there once. So there was a proposal to enact, I think it was a 40%, maybe, I don't, maybe more than that, tax on vaping equipment and vaping juice.
Interesting.
And at the time, my brother and I had just quit smoking, and we got really heavy into all the cool vape shit
naturally
that we have, you know. I have tackle boxes of stuff. It's interesting because it is the technology for it has absolutely been lightning quick. You know, 4 years ago, we all had these really crappy little, little sticks that didn't really make a lot, and they were really trying to emulate smoking cigarettes, and a community kind of got around it, and people started making their own equipment to have different effects for what they wanted, and it ended up becoming a modding community.
I see people with their little grenade boxes.
Oh, hell yeah, totally. People were, because that's what they were doing, is that they called them mods because what they were initially were flashlight mods. They would take a flashlight and they would take the filament out and they would make their own little coils. So for the first couple of years that we were doing this, that's what we were doing. We had custom mods that were made by people in their garages to house our batteries. And then we would sit looking like fiends, wrapping up little coils to the specific, diameters that we had
modern
measured
fly
out.
fishing.
It was like fly fishing. Absolutely, it was just like
that.
Your
whole tackle box.
It was
so
just
cool.
like tying flies for fly fishing. Except you're doing it with this metal piece of Kanthal wire, and so it was proposed. We were members too of Reddit's. Our electronic cigarette mod or subreddit, and there was this post that came up and said, "Hey, there's going to be a meeting for this legislative group is going to it's a budget control board is going to have a meeting that is open to the public about this issue." There is an advocacy group that we have that we are sending a representative. And everyone on the subreddit knew this guy because he's like the one representative that...
Yeah.
And he was a lawyer from New York City. And he was the guy that we were kind of bouncing around, He got funding from a lot of private brick and mortar shops in New York City. And other people were actually paying into this little...
That's awesome.
Committee to fund this guy to go and speak on behalf of this issue.
Small dollar lobby.
It really was a small dollar lobby, absolutely.
That's so funny.
And it came up on the subreddit, and they were going to send him. His name was John. I can't remember his last name. They were going to send him to the budget control board, and we're going to talk on the issue. And Brian and I, we were both off of work. We're like, hey, let's go down to that. That could be cool. Like, let's go. So we went, and we were 2 people out of, I want to say, 10, including this guy, John.
Yeah.
And we ended up showing up, and it was just like you said, like we walked into a room where they were having their little meeting, and we all kind of crowd in there because the rooms weren't really big.
Yeah.
And people were just all weighing in on this issue, and the control board also brought the state director of health. So he was a pulmonologist who's been involved with the state for many, many years. I want to say his position is health director or medical board director. I can't remember precisely his title. But the first thing we do is when we sit down, he comes in and he weighs in and he quotes a completely bogus study.
Wow.
He sits down and he's like, hey, vaping is found to have these harmful chemicals in it based on this study. And based on this, we can know that vaping is harmful to people, and we should go ahead with taxing that until we have further information.
What made the study bogus?
The study was completely bogus because it was done at temperatures that are completely outside of the realm that you would ever use.
Okay, so within the vaping community,
right,
you guys are highly attuned to appropriate temperatures,
right,
for
absolutely
these filaments,
right.
And
so,
this guy is saying like, yeah, apparently when you turn it up to 400 degrees, you
This was
totally
a study that was looking for formaldehyde, and then when they did the study, they vaped at essentially like 1,000 watts, which is probably by like a magnitude of 10 beyond what anyone could reasonably vape at that. Like it's like if you're vaping at 100 watts with a reasonable size.
I'm trying to imagine like 1,000-watt speaker system or something.
It was an enormous amount of power that they were using.
It's a lot of juice.
And they found in their findings, they found formaldehyde in the residual gases that had created.
Okay,
but it was the same amount of formaldehyde that you get from heating room air up to that temperature.
Oh wow!
So like it was such a tiny amount.
Room air can be converted into formaldehyde?
There is formaldehyde in the air that you and I are breathing right now.
So it's just like a residual.
It is extremely tiny trace amount.
Yeah. Okay.
That's essentially what they had found.
Oh, okay.
And that wasn't. And so the conclusion of the study was that yes, vaping contains formaldehyde. And it was and it was a well-known study. It was a well-known, that it was a bogus study. Yeah. It was a well-known thing that had, bounced around. So on our electronic cigarettes back then, there was a lot of times studies would come up. And it's a problem that we didn't really know anything about until we, were doing this. Was that there is you can get pretty much whatever results you want out of a study if you're offering grant money out. The scientific community right now has kind of a problem with publish or perish right now, where you're either going to publish the results that people want you to, or you're going to lose your funding, and as a result. These studies, these really bogus studies.
It's kind of like science is a lot like healthcare, in that when you put a profit motive there,
exactly,
it's really fucking dangerous.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what was going on in the early days. And when I say early days, I mean like 4 years ago. There was this big push to convince the public, who I believe still has a general mentality that vaping is very bad for you, and then it's as bad for you as smoking cigarettes.
Well, it's sold right next to it, or right on the same shelf at the gas station.
Totally.
What is a person to think?
Absolutely.
It is technically still tobacco, and I guess the question is it really that it is a tobacco?
It's not tobacco.
Oh,
it does not contain tobacco. It contains nicotine in a lot of cases.
So nicotine's extracted from tobacco.
Yes, that is where it's the only place nicotine can come from, is from the tobacco plant.
Okay.
But it's in the same way that Coca-Cola contains coffee.
Okay.
It's that's the chemical that is extracted and added. As far as it containing tobacco, I guess you could make that argument. I mean, it does contain nicotine, and nicotine comes from tobacco. So, but it doesn't contain anything else from tobacco. Anyways, one of the big points that they brought up, one of the people at the council was like, well, we don't know what vaping is. We don't know what's in there. And until we know what's in there, we don't know if it's safe. And my brother chimed in and he was like, I know what's in there. My brother really, really charmed this committee.
That's great.
They asked me to speak, and I passed my time because we were running out of time for the committee. And the guy who was sent from New York, he hadn't an opportunity to speak yet. They kind of waited for him to speak last. I think in a combination of he's not from Vermont, who's he?
Yeah.
And also, this is a guy who has a prepared statement. We don't want, and we don't. We'll let the yokels talk to us and
the
see
old
what they,
senile and just rambling.
Right? Yeah, we want to hear what they have to say. Right?
Yeah.
So my brother got a lot of time to talk, and he really charmed the pants off that committee, and he killed it. And he was like, "I know what's in there. Here's what's in there," and really made some fantastic points, and I think caused them to really pause to consider. That bill ended up I think it went to the floor and then was never enacted on. So we don't have a big, huge tax. I think maybe a small part due to us going to that meeting.
And this was Vermont specific?
This was at the State House in Montpelier.
Great.
This was directly under the Golden Dome.
Ah, it's so beautiful to hear like a story of like, a political or a political perspective that's, heard.
Yeah,
that's all I would expect from any government is to hear people.
Right. It's because people have people in this day and age, it's really hard to know what to believe. It's there's so much bad science kicking around. There's so much. There are very, very powerful companies and very powerful, well-researched, well-studied ways to change the perceptions of people on large scales. And, consent is manufactured. And so I didn't blame any of those committee members that we went in there and they're like, oh, these guys are essentially drug addicts. Like, everyone knows that vaping's horrible for you. Like, what's their problem? Like, we're going to tax it because it's a sin, like smoking cigarettes, because it's the same thing, right? It's tobacco in there, right? And they didn't really know, but those were their perceptions were, and those were what their biases were based off of. And
it's not bad to have a bias when
it's inevitable to have a bias. We all have biases about things, no matter what. And those are most of the time shaped by other people because, I don't do a lot of research on what I think about, I don't know.
I guess you'd have to be doing basic research.
Right.
Like actually studying, like observations in order to not have a human-induced bias.
Exactly. And like when you went to the State House and you were like, hey, here's this problem with water runoff. And then when you actually sat down and were talking to people who really knew their shit about it and could I bet you it changed your perspective a lot about how
it did.
It's like, this is a bigger problem than I thought. And and it's if you can sit down with people and have those discussions at a state level, your state is going to be good. Like, your state's going to be great. And I was impressed by that. And I've been really I think Vermont, it has some issues, but this is a state that really has its head screwed on straight when it comes to its politics and its government and its willingness to listen to people. And I really, really like Vermont for that. It's great.
I do too.
Last year in Pennsylvania, they enacted a 40% statewide tax on all vaping supplies and juice.
40%?
40%, just across the board, out of nowhere, kind of quietly slipped it through.
Oh my God.
In the town I grew up in, which is downstream from Pittsburgh, you can't even open up a McDonald's. Like, these are like little Rust Belt, rundown, old mill towns that have had nothing in them since the 70s except houses. Like, there's just, you can't even open up a restaurant. Like, forget it. Vape shops. Last time I went to Pittsburgh, like just before this tax went into place, vape shops all over the place. Like, the craze is like spreading like wildfire. And, how do you open a small business in Coriopolis? Jesus.
Yeah, for God's sakes, they
was
found something.
Yeah, there was 4 vape shops, and they were all awesome little boutique-y things with guys like who knew their stuff, and were making their own juices, and were experimenting with flavors, and were loving what they were doing, and were making a buck doing it.
Yeah,
and were paying taxes and rent in the little spots where they decided to do so. And I was like, this is great. This is so cool. 40% across the board tax. Like, get rid of those guys. Like, just get rid of them. Like, this is a great thing that we should foster. Kill it. Just kill it. Like, just kill it. R.J. Reynolds.
Yeah, I mean, a tax generally has, like, there's always an endless pit of need for money. And generally there's like some sort of moral behind a tax. Like we're doing it for your good.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to consider that the people who enacted that tax didn't give two shits about the people who are actually starting a business and trying to, like, a 40% tax is like such a huge chunk.
It was huge. It was huge. And it's so a lot of these shops, so I don't know what they're doing about it. I know that there's a lot of ways around the tax that people are taking advantage of. It hasn't killed the movement off. These are like small business guys who they're going to do what they want to do, and they really love it, and they love what they're doing. So it's like,
yeah,
they'll figure out ways around it. But I don't know exactly how all that works. I haven't been back to PA in a little while, so I should read up a little bit more about it.
I wonder if it just puts a pressure on people to under the table type of shit.
I'm very sure a lot of that's going on, and good, because you know what?
It just creates an animosity that isn't needed, like, you know.
There is also a little bit of validity to states are very dependent on their sin taxes.
Yeah.
And when you have something like vaping coming in that is going to detract from that cash cow that the state is getting from cigarette sales.
Oh, interesting.
How do you pick up the slack? Well, what's coming in and detracting from our cash cow? Let's call that a sin too. When really it isn't all that harmful for you, and it's a much better alternative. And the vaping movement and large quantities of people quitting smoking is in the long term going to save the state so much money on healthcare costs. Like, this is a good thing for your state. This is something you want.
that's the main argument. Like, once you get past, okay, formaldehyde's in the air. Okay, we're not using these crazy wattages. We know what we're doing a little bit. Then you have to just, like, on a plain scale, weigh them. And I've never really been comfortable with the idea that cigarettes pay for playgrounds.
Yeah, you know,
like, that's always been kind of weird. Like, there's tons of money coming out of cigarettes, and this is what's paying for our playgrounds, our water systems, our, you know.
Right, you know, it's,
like, is that even, does it make even any sense? I don't know.
It's hard, and it's honestly, it's something I wish I knew more about, how these funds are appropriated, and how, you know, I was really on this stuff about 4 years ago, and I could have given you a much more thorough breakdown on how that all works then. Yeah. But I've kind of moved away from that scene a little bit. I still vape on the reg, but I went back to cigarettes back in December, and I've just been smoking packs since. I'm going to try to give it another shot in October. October's my new quit date. I'm going to try to put these down again. At the beginning of August, I put them down for 2 weeks, and then I picked them back up again. But I'm going to give it another shot in October. And I'm going to get back on the vape train, and it's going to be good. And hopefully, I can re-educate myself on some of this stuff. What's happening in our state? What's happening in other states? Yeah. And be a little bit more informed about how all that works. But 4 years ago, man, I was the man. Like, I could have been that guy from New York State. Like, you know, they could have hired me to go and speak to the committee.
Isn't it so empowering once you get a little bit involved and you start saying, absolutely, you can just change the mind of a few people and actually have a seat at the table.
That was exactly my experience, and it was amazing. It's the first time I've ever felt like government works. It's not just this dinner party for the super wealthy lobbyists and the people who buy them. That was my experience at the State House in Vermont, and I was very, very impressed by your state. And it was really cool, and it was great. The lobbyist that we had there, he only got to speak for a couple of minutes. But one thing he did do was that after the health director left, and this was an older guy, very distinguished position, pulmonologist for years and years and years and years, he goes up to him, he gets a little aggressive with him, and he's like, that study is bogus. You know that study is bogus.
Yeah.
Whose agenda are you working for? You're a quack. And, like, called him a quack, like, yelled at him. Like, it was great. It was like, whoa.
That's powerful.
It was powerful. It was cool. And his points were great. He had a prepared statement. He really punched home the issues that we wanted. But I think what really... and I don't want to, but I think my brother's statement that he made, he really, he was good cop, and this lobbyist guy, he was bad cop. And between the two of them, I think they really did have a profound effect on the perceptions that the council had. Yeah.
I don't know a ton about vaping. I learned a lot just now. But it's really interesting to, I guess, the only thing that's left, if you have the capacity to enact change, is to actually know what you want.
True. And you know what? It's always tough too, because, even if you get everything you want, you create new problems. Yeah. And that's the nature of government. And, that's why I think keeping things small and keeping the table open to discussion is very, very key. And, vaping legislation, even if I got everything I wanted, would still create problems. And it would still create, issues for other people. And the state would still have issues with, we're not getting enough money, or, it's... Any change you make is just going to make, it's the butterfly effect of problems later on down the line, even if they are for the better. Have you ever heard of what's called a COBRA problem?
I've never heard that term.
It's a great term. A COBRA problem is when you have a very logical, very reasonable solution to a problem that makes that problem 10 times worse because circumstances are what they are. In India, the British military had a problem. There was too many fucking cobras all over the place. And soldiers were getting spit at and bitten. So their solution to the problem was they hired local populace. Well, they didn't hire them. They enacted a bounty system for cobras. Anybody who wants to go out, hunt these cobras, kill off these cobras for us, bring us back some dead cobras and we'll pay you for them. That was going to solve their problem.
Solid.
Pretty good plan, I think. Like, hey, you have too many cobras, set up bounties so that people bring in the dead cobras, and now you don't have any cobras. Like, it's a logical, reasonable, so what happened were people started farming cobras. People started these cobra farms so that they could continue to collect these bounties.
Yeah. Oh, I'll bring you 100 a fucking day.
Yeah, I'll bring you 100 a day. Sure, no problem. As a result, they stopped the bounty program because they realized people were farming.
Yeah.
So they said, no more bounties for cobras. So what do all the cobra farmers do?
Let them all loose.
They let them all loose. And now you have a cobra problem. Your solution to your problem, which was fine. Like, what could go wrong, has made your problem...
You don't want these 10,000 cobras right now? Okay.
Right. Just let them go, right. Has made your problem exponentially worse. And there's just it's like, I think that's what government is. Like, it's just... Like
you're constantly really, chasing its own tail.
Exactly. I think to be in a legislative position, you are really always struggling with the problem. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And a lot of the solutions, even if you think they're for the best, are just going to make more problems. And when you look at it through that lens, you can see why people get jaded and why people give in to corruption. It's like, I can't make everyone happy, so I might as well make the person who's going to pay me happy. Yeah. And I think that
constantly being in a position of fucking somebody over.
We're going to do it to someone else anyways. Because
you're trying to help people.
Right, so...
So bad.
It's and I think that, I don't want to go on a tangent about lobbying and the issues that we have with our government, but...
we gotta circle back to water.
We do.
It's called VT water cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And it really...
is it all right we go out for a smoke first?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Cool.
And we can come back and talk about water.
Yeah, let's do that, man.
We got to try to talk about something else in the meantime so we don't waste it. This is the intermission. We gotta bring it home with some discussion about water.
Let's do it, dude. Now, I can't profess to be a expert on the topic, but
you're a resident.
Fire away, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about before, we were talking about how there's political agency in Vermont, and you need only know what you want to ask for.
Right.
And this may cause problems.
Sure.
And it will undoubtedly cause problems in other areas to try and apply fixes, but it's still worth going after solutions.
Absolutely.
And I think my goal is to encourage Vermont to keep excelling in the direction of being really good with the natural resource of water specifically.
Yes.
And so that leaves knowing what we need.
Yeah, totally.
Or maybe finding examples of other municipalities doing a good job in an area and trying to acquire that model or something.
I agree. It's a problem where so when you went to the State House and you ended up talking to some of the guys on the when you talked to the state senator.
Yeah, the Natural Resource Board.
Yeah. What did they bring to light to you? How did they enlighten you a little bit to this problem, and how did they what did they let you in on that you didn't consider before? Like when you sat down, I'm sure that they were able to bring to light some perspectives that maybe you didn't have before. What did they talk to you about, and what did they show you when you sat down with them that was interesting to you?
Yeah, this gentleman David Dean is the guy that I was speaking with, and a big part of what he was telling me was that, listen, this is not a partisan issue. It's kind of fiscal. But everybody wants clean water.
Sure.
And actually everybody's kind of on board with any solution we can
absolutely
to deal with these problems. But so one thing was it's not really a partisan issue.
Right.
Which kind of said, okay, well, there's no blockade.
Sure.
There's nobody saying this will never happen because it's totally against our ideology. I don't think anybody has an ideology against water or clean water.
Listen, God put the water the way it is where He put it, and God don't make no mistakes. So, right.
I'll roll with that.
It's one of the things
that is so. It works on both sides.
Yeah, totally right. It's one of those things that's so easy to take for granted, not just here in Vermont, but everywhere in the country, is that we have access to clean water. It comes out of a hole in our house. We flush our waters with clean toilets, or our toilets with clean water. It's part of the things that it's one of the things that makes it's one of those things that's very easy to take for granted when in fact it is a very difficult system to maintain, and solving the problems that this massive, really, really awesome system that we have. It's like for an example, we'd almost all be better off if our electricity in our house didn't work for a day out of the year.
Yeah.
If they just had an intentional shutdown of all electricity to your town for a day, just to remind people, hey, we have these systems in place, and they're great, and they work well. Don't take them for granted, because they do have problems with them that require a lot of work to solve, and people need to be aware of that. So when you talk about the Vermont water problem and our wastewater management systems, it's, of course, everybody wants clean water. Of course, everybody wants that. Reminding people that they want that can sometimes, I think, be a bit of a challenge. And bringing that issue to light is important. And I think that's what you're going to do here with your show, which is pretty cool. I think if we can get this to the ears of some people, we can absolutely, shed light on that issue and what needs to happen.
Yeah, I'm really interested in making my show kind of entertaining, first and foremost, because I want people to just want to engage with the show and like start like a community, start like, I don't know, if I'm going to go the Patreon route. I'm probably going to completely avoid ads.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, it is kind of a politically charged thing. And it would be too easy to just like, pick up ad space from some pool and spa company.
Sure. Absolutely. It's like
something like
this show brought to you by audible.com.
So I'm going to try and avoid, and I don't really expect to make money off of it. I have all the equipment already. Everything's all set up. Like my goal from here is to just kind of do my job and make sure I do an interview with like somebody every other weekend or something like that.
Totally.
And I'm pretty good with editing, so it shouldn't be a problem to just whip this up.
Sure. Yeah.
And my expenses that are ongoing, like I essentially found a way to publish via YouTube. I don't know how well that's going to work or if it's going to be something, but currently I post a video to a certain channel, and that channel automatically puts it on iTunes.
I see. Okay,
and so I have a Google scraper that just automatically, if there's ever a video on this YouTube channel, it gets put on iTunes as a podcast.
Nice.
So it's a pretty like easy to produce. Like I don't really have operating costs moving forward.
Right.
There's a little bit of investment in getting some of these key pieces, but so I want to have an entertaining podcast, and that's why I really wanted to not go after the book tour.
Sure.
A lot of podcasts just like to have an agent who's out there looking at who's trying to sell a book right now, and they just have a train of people who are very intelligent. You have to be at a certain level to even be motivated or capable of writing a novel or a nonfiction book. But
no doubt.
And there's a value in that I see in other podcasts.
Sure.
But what's detracting is that it's lacking a personal feel. It doesn't feel like those two people wanted to talk.
Right. Yeah. It's like,
like
they're talking,
they're going through the motions.
Right. And they're talking at each other, and they're not talking with each other, and totally.
There's great content. I learned a couple of things, but so I want to kind of make my guest list varied. I want to have older people, younger people, and really just talk to interesting people.
Sure.
And when I was talking to you at the bar the other night, I was like, this guy's interesting.
Well, I'm flattered. Thank you.
He's coming on my show.
And I got to tell you, man, this is a blast. I really like this. This is fun. I can't wait to come and do this again with you sometime. Like, this is great.
Absolutely.
Not to say we're done, but this is cool. Like, this is I'd also love to bring my brother maybe one time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because he has a lot of information. If you were to do a show on vaping and taxing, I would be a little bit more prepared.
Vape has a little water in it, right?
It does. It absolutely does. There you go. Right.
That's really
we've come full circle.
That's why I chose water as my whipping boy, because it so covers across the board. Like, I want to be tangential with my conversations,
of course,
because that's natural,
right?
And like, I want to have natural conversations because that's what I appreciate in podcasts.
Sure,
and so that covers the entertaining part, and all I got to do is basically just take people along with me, and along the way, try and at least explore topics, and I feel like we really explored Vermont politics.
We did
a lot.
We did, absolutely.
And really, I guess I'm just curious, like, what direction you'd like to see the show go.
Sure, totally.
Because it's
I think for a good podcast, you do want to have a focus.
Yeah.
But like you said, in order to make it interesting, it is important that you go into different directions while you're having it. Absolutely. Having your guests be not necessarily experts, but people who can, I don't know, maybe just offer different perspectives or offer, be able to just kind of like weigh in on some of these issues from maybe even not being from a professional standpoint, but just as a, hey, I'm a concerned citizen and here's what I think. I think is awesome. And that is, that is, I think, what is going to be like really powerful going forward for you with your show, especially if it gets to the ear of people who do make decisions about these issues. So it's, I think that is good. And how do you maintain that balance is the question. You know, like how do you let's keep it on topic, but let's make sure that it does go in these directions. I think the
only way I can accomplish that is with feedback.
True.
Because there needs to be, like, I want to try and set up a Facebook page, a Twitter, like the whole social thing, so that when people listen, they have a way to ping at me and say, that was cool, but, why the fuck did you guys talk about vaping for fucking 5 hours?
Yeah, but StarCraft...
like, I want to be able to hear that.
Like, I don't want to talk about StarCraft. You're just like, get out of my show. Like, yeah.
StarCraft sucks.
Exactly. Right.
See you later, dude. This is my podcast.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's like... I think if you're going to have especially a topic that I think is a little bit unknown to people too, like water, having people maybe prepare a little bit and have maybe just like hey, here's the issue in black and white, and here's what we need to kind of go forward. Here are the problems with doing that. Here are the... and maybe just make a little outline before your show. And maybe just like highlight 5 points for your show. Like nothing to say like you're reading off a script.
Yeah.
But maybe be like, hey, topic 1, water in Vermont. Here's the issue that we're having with it right now. And then maybe being able to, maybe even before the mics go on, share with that person like, hey, here's what I want to talk about. Here are some of the points that we might touch on. But leave it vague. Like, make it an outline.
Yeah.
But make it vague and make it so that the show is not going off of a script. But that way you can kind of bring it back and be like, hey, here's the deal with water, and here's the problem, and here's why, and what do you think? And I think too, on that point, it's an issue that I personally don't know a ton about. I think a lot of people don't know a ton about it. To have a little bit of, to have some facts and to have some structure there as to how you highlight the problem that you want to talk about is going to be important for making a good show. I would recommend that if we were to sit down and do this again and have the same topic, the same conversation, that we would have an outline of like maybe 5 bullet points and be like, hey, bullet point 1 is, here's the problem. Then bullet point 2 end up being, here's a proposed way that we could solve it, but here are the issues we run into when we do that. And then see where the conversation goes from there. You know what I mean? And then if I were to come back and do this show again on the topic of water, I would be a little bit more prepared for it. I'd be like a little bit more, okay, maybe I need to look into this myself a little bit because it's an issue that I don't really know a ton about, you know?
Well, this is a philosophical struggle that I've had because, I mean, I've been thinking about getting this podcast set up for the last 6 months easily.
Sure, totally.
And I put a lot of thought into it. And I've thought about what level of scripting to do. I've thought about possibly just doing a monologue and writing it.
Sure. Hey.
That could be, maybe a segment or something in the future, a bonus episode. I don't know.
Sure.
But what I've come back to a number of times is with structure, you lose the ability to veer or to stray from the topic. And honestly, if I had hit you with 5 bullet points on what we're going to talk about, we would be on bullet point number 4.
Right.
And obviously we're going to talk about bullet point number 5, and then we're going to call it a show.
True.
And we might not have even gotten into vaping.
That's true.
And that's a loss that I'm afraid of.
I hear you.
Because a person's perspective, their strengths, their experiences don't necessarily... I can't pigeonhole that before I know. Like, I guess if I knew somebody really well and I knew that they were like really into this one thing, then I could... I still don't even think it would be worth the bullet points.
Right.
Because I wouldn't want to... pigeonhole a person into having to talk about a certain thing.
No,
even if I had like somebody who's like, oh great, I got this guest, he's from the waterworks department, and the waterworks department has this thing that's going on politically over the last like 6 months, and I'd love to talk to him about X political thing in the waterworks department.
Right.
That could be so far from like anything that matters. And I would be trying to like coax the conversation over there, and like people can sense when they're being pushed into an area of the conversation. So like I've thought about that a lot, and I keep coming down to, well, okay, I'm a human and I know how to talk.
Sure.
And that's what people are really most comfortable doing. Rather than trying to perform, because like I feel like I haven't had to perform at all tonight. Like we're just we've been talking. It's been comfortable, and like halfway through, I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, actually, I would totally listen to this conversation. Like this seems pretty like a pretty interesting. Like we've taken some really cool paths with it, and we kind of bring it back. And I think that's just my job as a host. To say, okay, we've gone here. Let's nudge it in the right direction. But other than that, I don't want to do too much. So yeah, I've had that inclination. Like I should have bullet points. I should prepare them. I should be sending them emails before so they know what we're going to talk about, and they know what my rules are on. Like I'm going to edit it, and I'll send you a copy, and then we can talk about it if I don't know about weed, or do you smoke weed, or I don't know if any of this is going to work. And I turn into a mess when I try to organize it too much.
But I totally understand.
When I speak to a person, the structure comes out. Like the structure's there.
It is, no doubt. And, it is. It is the most important thing is going to be moving forward with the show is it interesting? Is it, are we talking about, the things that, because yes, there are going to be people out there, there is no question, that are going to be interested in the topics and the tangents and the asides that we've talked about, like no question about it. It's a question of how do we make the show about water? Which in hindsight is not super important. It's having good conversation with good people, and that is definitely going to be what draws people to your show, I think. And I think that you've got that down pat.
Thanks.
No, thank you. So I'm interested to hear. Tell me the story about when you went to the State House and what was brought to light to you, and how.
I was saying that it's not a partisan thing, but also I got one thing about speaking to a person in person is you can detect whether or not they're bullshitting you.
Absolutely.
Or
they don't want to hear what you're saying.
You can read so much into their face and their tone, their posture. And when I was speaking with this guy, he was 15 minutes from having to jump on the floor And his mind was already there a little bit.
Sure.
And the things that he was saying to me were almost as if he was like, no. Well, like, it doesn't work like that. Like, essentially, the real problem is, like, yeah, I get it. We got old sewer pipes. Great. Our real problem is like, how do we deal with this agricultural system
that
is demotivated to change?
Interesting.
And how do we deal with, and that's maybe a little bit of what I've read into it, but how do we deal with doing something that is effective on an efficiency level of what's going to get the best bang for our buck?
Right. And how do you even measure bang for buck when it comes to this particular issue? Like, what is it we're trying to specifically fix?
Yeah.
Like, what is the...
Well, their measurement, their metric was essentially phosphorus. Like, how much phosphorus hits Lake Champlain.
Right, okay.
And Lake Champlain is basically what half of the state empties into.
Right.
The other half empties into...
the Connecticut River.
The Connecticut River.
Right.
And essentially, yeah, I got to figure out what that other thing... I don't think it's a carbon cycle. Like, maybe it's too much carbon. That doesn't make sense.
Well, it's when you're talking about a large stagnant body of water, anything that is running off into that, the nasty stuff is going to likely have a bit more of an impact because you're talking about a body of water that who knows how long it takes for that volume of water to replace itself.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if you could have like a water droplet sized GPS tracker.
Yeah,
just like throw
totally.
it somewhere and then like measure it. Like, I'd like to get into cool little projects like that where on a particular episode, like, we agreed to talk about the results of a water test.
Yeah, somewhere. Or like I threw a GPS tracker buoy into the lake, see where it's gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd like to have stuff like that where my conversation focuses or comes back to some project that I do with a guest or something like that. Like we try and accomplish some small bit of science to further the general public knowledge of what's going on with the water in Vermont.
Totally. Absolutely. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Throwing, I think, like, I wonder if there's a test you could do where you, like, take a buoy or something, maybe a weighted buoy or something, so that instead of it sitting just on the top and knowing where surface water is flowing, maybe have something that is weighted in such a way that it will be beneath the surface of the water.
Like
have it go to a certain
bottom of, like, the sand.
Or like specify a specific depth for it to kind of hang out in and say, hey, yeah, sure, surface water, yeah, that moves in and out, and algae eats the phosphorus, and that's all well and good. What about the deep water? What about the deep lake phosphorus content of the lake, and how long does that take to replace itself? How long does that take?
A great idea.
What's that?
Submarine drone.
Dude.
I want one.
Dude.
You just you set the depth on it so that it can actually nail the depth.
And then you could take like water sample.
So fucking cool.
You could take you could strap a little water. You can waterproof a GoPro onto that thing and go to town. That would be cool.
Yeah, and you could just have like a little tube with like a stopper on it, and then just an actuated arm that pulls the stopper in, and then there's your water sample from that depth at wherever the fuck it is. Oh God, I want a submarine drone so bad now.
Next episode, submarine drones.
Yeah, submarine drone.
Yeah,
that's where it's going.
Who makes submarine drones? Because this show brought to you by
Rob, it's been a good show.
Yes. Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This has been a blast.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to do it again.